December 22, 1944. Bastogne, Belgium. Snow falls thick and relentless, blanketing shattered trees and frozen trenches. The temperature hovers at 10 degrees Fahrenheit. Inside a crumbling farmhouse, General Anthony McAuliffe studies a tattered map by candlelight. His 101st Airborne Division is surrounded, ammunition dwindling, medical supplies exhausted. Outside, German artillery rumbles like distant thunder. The siege has lasted 6 days. 3 miles away, American soldiers huddle in foxholes, their breath crystallizing in the air, listening for the next attack. One truth cuts through the cold: help must come soon, or Bastogne will fall. And only one man could break through the ice and enemy lines to save them. Patton's Third Army stood ready for its own offensive when the German blitzkrieg shattered the Ardennes front. 300,000 men, 6 armored divisions, and 1,700 tanks were positioned to strike east toward the Saar River, a campaign months in planning. Now, Eisenhower needed them turn north on impossible notice. At the Verdun command post on December 19th, snow melting on Patton's boots, he studied the situation map. German panzers had split the Allied lines, trapping Bastogne's vital road junction. The 101st Airborne and elements of the 10th Armored Division were encircled, low on ammunition, medical supplies dwindling. Patton calculated the nightmare, pivoting his entire force 90 degrees in winter, across frozen roads, against stubborn German resistance. He promised Eisenhower he could attack within 48 hours. The clock started ticking as Patton returned to his command post. Every hour counted in the race to save Bastogne, and the Third Army's maneuver would become one of history's most audacious battlefield turns. Bastogne was no ordinary crossroads. 7 major roads converged there, controlling access to the Meuse River bridges 50 miles west. If the Germans captured it, their armored spearheads could race across Belgium unimpeded. Field Marshal Montgomery ordered retreats elsewhere, but Eisenhower refused to abandon Bastogne. The 101st Airborne 18,000 men held the town with dwindling ammunition and no winter gear. German forces under General von Luttwitz tightened the noose to panzer divisions and an infantry corps, their tanks cutting supply lines. Meanwhile, Patton's Third Army faced its own crisis. His planned Saar offensive had stockpiled fuel and ammunition for eastward movement. Now, he needed to redirect 150,000 men, 1,000 tanks, and 80,000 vehicles northward through snow-choked roads. The weather remained catastrophic: zero visibility, grounded with Allied air support. At his Luxembourg headquarters on December 20th, Patton told his staff, "The enemy has stuck his head in a meat grinder. Now we must pull the handle." His engineers worked through the night, calculating routes, fuel requirements, and attack timings. The entire Allied strategy hinged on one man's ability to perform the impossible, and the clock was running out for the trapped men at Bastogne. Inside Bastogne, Private James Anderson dug frozen rations from his pack. His fingers were blue with frostbite. The 101st Airborne held 5 miles of perimeter with rifles, machine guns, and sheer will. Medical supplies had run out on day 3. Surgeons operated by flashlight in cellar hospitals, reusing bandages. Outside town, Corporal Harold Wilson manned a machine gun nest. His unit had repelled 3 German attacks that morning. Snow filled his foxhole faster than he could shovel it out. "We knew help was coming," he later wrote. "We just didn't know if it would arrive in time." Patton's tactical challenge defied military logic. Turning an entire army mid-campaign required precision timing. His Third Army had to disengage from active combat positions near Saarbrücken. 17,000 vehicles, tanks, trucks, half-tracks needed new routes through ice-glazed roads. General Hugh Gaffney coordinated the movement. His staff worked 16-hour shifts, marking maps with colored pencils. They calculated fuel consumption down to the gallon. Each division required 30,000 gallons daily. Snowplows led armored columns through whiteout conditions. German forward observers reported unusual American movements. But the scale of the pivot remained hidden until too late. Winter warfare exposed technological limitations. Sherman tanks struggled in deep snow. Their narrow tracks sank while German Panthers used wider treads. American soldiers lacked proper cold weather gear. Many wore summer uniforms with added layers. Frostbite cases skyrocketed. Field kitchens couldn't operate in sub-zero temperatures. Patton ordered engineers to modify vehicles overnight. Chains were welded to tank tracks. Trucks received makeshift snow blades. Communications broke down constantly. Radios froze. Field telephone lines snapped under ice weight, yet Patton pushed forward. He visited frontline units personally, standing in snowdrifts beside his men. "We will attack in all weather," he told officers. "God may not be on our side, but we will make our own luck." The Third Army's movement became a symphony of desperation and engineering, each truck, tank, and soldier part of a machine racing against time and temperature. The human cost of delay grew heavier with every passing hour. German intelligence initially dismissed reports of Patton's movement. Field Marshal Model believed the Third Army remained fixed near the Saar. His focus stayed on crushing Bastion's defenders. Inside the pocket, General McAuliffe faced impossible choices. When German emissaries demanded surrender on December 22, his famous reply nuts masked desperate reality. The 101st had only 2 days of ammunition left. Medical teams performed surgeries without anesthesia. Soldiers melted snow for water, burning precious wood for warmth. Patton's most controversial decision came on December 23. With skies clearing after days of fog, he ordered chaplains to pray for good weather. "Almighty and merciful God," the prayer read, "we call upon Thee in our need." Critics called it theatrical, but results followed. Clear skies allowed Allied fighters to strafe German positions and drop supplies. Patton knew timing was everything. His southern spearhead General Abrams' combat command B punched through German lines near Assenois. Sherman tanks fired their 75mm guns in rapid succession, their crews exhausted but relentless. From Berlin, Hitler grew impatient. He needed Bastogne captured to maintain momentum. German commanders on the ground reported stiffening American resistance. The weather had turned against them. Patton's pivot had succeeded beyond expectations. His army covered 60 miles in 72 hours, twice the speed German planners deemed possible. The stage was set for the final push. As dawn broke on December 26, Patton stood at a forward observation post, field glasses trained on Bastogne's outskirts. The moment of truth had arrived. December 26, 1944, for 45 a.m., the eastern horizon bled crimson through thinning clouds. Colonel Creighton Abrams' Combat Command B, 4th Armored Division, rolled north through frozen fields near Assenois. His Sherman tanks moved in staggered formation, 11 vehicles strong, kicking up plumes of powdered snow. German 88mm guns opened fire from concealed positions. 2 Shermans erupted in flames. Abrams didn't hesitate. "Keep moving," he radioed. No stopping for anything. His men called him Sonny Jim for his relentless optimism. Today, that optimism carried the weight of 18,000 trapped souls. At Bastogne's southern perimeter, Sergeant William Jacobson of the 327th Glider Infantry heard the distant thunder of Abrams' advance. His company had held this ridge for 9 days on half rations and frozen K rations. Machine gun barrels had frozen solid twice. Jacobson passed around a single canteen of melted snow. "Listen," he whispered, "that's not German artillery. That's our boys." Abrams' spearhead reached the Assenois crossroads at 6:17 a.m. German Panther tanks emerged from tree lines, their long barrels glinting in dawn light. What followed was pure armored warfare, close range, brutal, decisive. Lieutenant Charles Bogus Company C destroyed 3 Panthers in 7 minutes. Private James Hendricks, a 19-year-old tank loader, fired 17 rounds in 8 minutes until his loader's gloves froze to the ammunition rack. The temperature read -5 Fahrenheit. At 7:30 a.m., Captain William Dwight's tank column punched through the final German roadblock. His lead Sherman named Cobra King rolled onto the Bastogne Road. Through his periscope, Dwight saw American foxholes ahead. Many merged from trenches, their faces blackened with frost and gunpowder. They waved ragged unit patches in the air. "Contact! Contact!" radio operators shouted. "We've broken through." Inside Bastogne, General McAuliffe received the message at 8:14 a.m. He looked up from his map table, exhaustion etched deep in his face. "Tell Patton," he said quietly, "the 101st is still here." By noon, a narrow corridor stood open barely 200 yards wide between Abrams' position and Bastogne's outskirts. Trucks loaded with medical supplies, ammunition, and hot food began rolling through under cover of tank fire. The siege had lasted 10 days. The cost was terrible: 341 dead, 965 wounded, hundreds suffering from frostbite and trench foot. But Bastogne held. As dusk fell on December 26, Patton visited the newly opened corridor. He stood beside a burning German half-track, its wreckage illuminating faces of exhausted but relieved soldiers. The temperature dropped to -10. Snow began falling again. Patton turned to his aide. "This isn't victory," he said. "It's survival. But survival buys us time to finish this war." The frozen ground beneath his boots held the weight of what came next: the long push toward Germany's heartland, where the final reckoning awaited. The relief of Bastogne marked not an end, but a crucial pivot point in the war's closing chapter. The frozen fields around Bastogne told a brutal story. By December 27th, medical teams counted 341 Americans dead in the perimeter defenses, another 965 wounded, many suffering from gangrene after frostbitten limbs went untreated for days. The 101st Airborne had burned every piece of wood in Bastogne for warmth, including church pews and coffin stocks. When supply trucks finally rolled through the corridor, they found men who hadn't eaten a hot meal in 10 days. Lieutenant Colonel Frank Neal of the 327th Glider Infantry reported, "Some soldiers wept when they saw the first sea rations. Others just stared at the steam rising from the cans." German losses were equally severe. The 5th Panzer Army had thrown 150,000 men against Bastogne's perimeter. They left behind 49 tanks destroyed in the final assault attempts, blackened hulks still smoldering in the snow. Field Marshal Model's staff recorded 5,000 casualties in the Bastogne sector alone. Morale collapsed among German units when they realized Patton's Third Army had achieved the impossible. Private Hans Schmidt of the 26th Volksgrenadier Division wrote in his diary, "We heard American trucks moving at night. Our officers said it was impossible. Then we saw the tanks. We knew the war was lost." Eisenhower visited Bastogne on December 28, standing beside Patton in the ruined town square. He awarded the 101st Airborne its first presidential unit citation. "No soldier in this army has done better," he told the assembled troops. But the strategic implications ran deeper. By holding Bastogne, the Americans had shattered Hitler's entire Ardennes timetable. His panzers needed those roads to reach the Meuse River bridges. Now, fuel shortages crippled German armored units. Colonel General Hasso von Manteuffel reported to Berlin, "The operation has failed. We cannot advance without Bastogne." Back in Luxembourg, Patton studied casualty reports with grim satisfaction. His Third Army had lost 4,000 men in the relief operation, most to frostbite and exposure rather than combat. But the cost was worth it. As he wrote in his diary that night, "The world has seen what American soldiers can do when properly led. Bastogne will be remembered when this war is over." The frozen ground around the town, held more than bodies. It held the broken remains of Germany's last great offensive. What followed would reshape military doctrine for generations to come. Bastogne became a textbook case in military academies worldwide. The U.S. Army restructured its entire winter warfare doctrine, issuing mandatory cold weather gear, developing heated vehicle compartments, and training units in rapid directional changes. Patton's pivot proved that armored forces could execute 90-degree turns mid-campaign, a tactic later used in Korea and Desert Storm. Tank design evolved too. Post-war Shermans received wider tracks and auxiliary heaters after Bastogne's frozen battlefield exposed their vulnerability. Diplomatically, the victory cemented Eisenhower's authority over Montgomery, ending British-American command disputes that had hampered earlier operations. Hitler's failed gamble cost Germany 120,000 irreplaceable troops and 800 tanks, resources that might have prolonged the war by months. As historian Carlo Dest noted, Bastogne didn't just stop the bulge, it accelerated Germany's collapse. The psychological impact resonated beyond military circles. Newsreels of frostbitten G is sharing cigarettes with medics rebuilt American morale after Pearl Harbor shadow. In Berlin, Goebbels banned newspapers from reporting the defeat. But the truth spread through German radio operators who'd heard Patton's tanks rumbling through snow. The frozen roads into Bastogne became pathways to a new understanding of modern warfare, one where logistics, weather, and sheer willpower could outweigh numerical superiority. What remained was not just a lesson in tactics, but a revelation about leadership under impossible conditions. Bastogne's frozen ground holds a truth deeper than myth. Patton didn't defy orders, he redefined what leadership could achieve under impossible conditions. His pivot wasn't rebellion, but calculation. 18,000 lives weighed against military orthodoxy. The cost was measured in frostbitten limbs and buried boys, yet the gamble succeeded because Patton understood that doctrine must bend to human necessity. In that desperate December, war revealed its essence, not in grand strategy, but in a 19-year-old loader, firing 17 rounds with frozen hands, in medics reusing bandages by candlelight, in a general standing in snowdrifts beside his men. Bastogne teaches us that victory often lives not in perfect obedience, but in the courage to choose humanity when the manual offers no answers. The road to peace begins where rigid rules end.